Aha. Hello, good afternoon. Very, very warm welcome to today's IFSEC Connect Strat Talk, which will focus on an industry view on the future of intruder detection, which, as we're currently seeing, is a technology which is going through a significant series of changes and evolution as demands and customers continue to develop. Now, when we're working at IFSEC, we've often heard lots and lots of industry people saying that the intruder alarms sector is actually the original technology. It's like the OG system for providing electronic security solutions for assets, businesses, and homeowners. So it's been fascinating to actually look into how 21st century technologies have actually enhanced the effectiveness of modern day intruder detection, and more importantly, how it's integrated into the overall security solution. So just to introduce everybody taking part today, I'm Gerry Dunphy from IFSEC International. I'll be your host and moderator, and I'm delighted to be joined by Adrian Mealing, Head of Industry Affairs at Texecom. Adrian's also the chair of the Security Equipment Manufacturers section at the BSIA. Good afternoon, Adrian.
Good afternoon, Gerry. How are you?
Very good, thank you very much. Yeah, also David Roscoe, who's the Field Operations Manager at SSAIB. Good afternoon, David.
Hi, Gerry.
Also, we've got Darrell Gilmour, who's the Director of Technical Training at Skills for Security. Good afternoon to you, Darrell.
David. Gerry, sorry, that was already the first.
David's everywhere. David's everywhere.
We'll get that out of the way early.
And also, we're joined by Sliwon-Stewart, who's a Senior Analyst and Research Manager from Omdia. So good afternoon to you, Anna, as well.
Good afternoon.
Brilliant. So if I may, I'll ask each of you to give a little bit of background to your roles and expertise, particularly relevant to today's discussion on intruder detection. So I'll start actually with Adrian. So Adrian, if you could just say hello to the audience, just give them a little bit of background about yourself, please.
Yeah, so I've been around the intruder business for around 30 years, having worked in distribution for installation companies and more formally now for manufacturing companies. Predominantly in the last 10 to 20 years or so, I've been heavily involved in standards development, both in the UK and in Europe. So it's quite interesting to see what's happening with the pace of change of technology and the fact that, you know, sometimes maybe the standards just aren't keeping up as quick as we'd like them to. So hopefully we can work on that in the future and get things changed.
Great stuff. Thanks very much for that. David, if we can move to you, please.
I presently work for Security Systems Alarm Inspection Board. I'm Field Operations Manager. We provide certification to the security and life safety industry through intruder, CCTV access control, monitoring centres, and also the managed services side of the business. I've been in electronic security for some 37 years, a couple more than Adrian, and worked for the SSAIB for since 2008, for about 12 or 13 years now.
Fantastic, great to have the experience on board. Thanks for that. Also, now move to Darrell, please.
Yep, well, hopefully that's the first and only mistake I'll make, first 30 seconds in. So, as Gerry mentioned, I'm a Technical Director for Skills for Security. I've been in the industry for about 10, 11 years, starting off as an installer and moving quite quickly up to design and sales before moving into education. I've been in the education side of the electronic fire and security sector for the last 3 to 4 years. My ambition coming into that side of the sector was to try and promote the training side and upskill and enhance the quality of the engineering throughout the sector. And my most recent move just in the last couple of weeks is coming to Skills and getting that opportunity to, rather than having it regionalised education, but to have an effect nationally, not just for the apprenticeship, but to try and grow commercial training as well and upskilling the existing engineers, as well as promoting the skill set coming through the apprenticeship as well.
Fantastic, and as we'll probably discover, training and skills are going to be incredibly important now moving through this new world. And finally, Anna, if we can move to you, please.
Sounds good, thank you. I'm Anna Sliwon-Stewart. I work for Omdia, and Omdia is actually the research part of Informa. So it's nice to be together here on this webinar and meet some of the other colleagues from the industry. I have covered the intruder alarms industry for the last 5 years, I think. It's gonna take over to 6 years very soon. But in my role here as a senior analyst, I have also covered a number of adjacent building technology systems. So having worked across fire, intrusion, access control on smart buildings, now it's very great to see how intruder alarm systems are actually interacting with all the other systems in the building. So it gives you a very good kind of overview and perspective. So I really look forward to our discussion today.
Fantastic, and as we'll see, you know, the evidence that we've got, it's very timely that we've got you on board. So so just to explain today's discussion, it's actually going to be a deep or deepish dive into the intruder alarms and detection industry, and we're going to be looking at its direction of travel mainly, and the challenges and opportunities that these things can actually offer security professionals and their customers, and the rapid emergence of new tech, because new tech is obviously something which is becoming incredibly important. The panel will actually be discussing the findings of an industry survey, which we recently undertook at IFSEC, where we put a range of broad and searching questions to some well-known vendors with extensive histories and influence in the security and intruder alarm and detection industry. And really, we just thought, who better to ask than these companies who are really much at the coalface. You know, they're dealing with their customers all day long. They're hearing their challenges, they're hearing their gripes, they're hearing their moans. As we know from a lot of them, the R&D is going off the scale at the moment. So it's really just a really good gauge now and deep dive to see what's actually going on with the intruder alarm industry. The participants in the research included Texecom, Pyronics, Vanderbilt, and HKC Systems. And we brought Omdia in as well in the shape of Anna, because Omdia have incredibly detailed analysis and research into this particular question. So we can actually get an idea of where the future direction of intruder detection is going and where this technology can actually enhance the security network. I just want to say a thanks to all the companies that participated in the survey. It's very, very gratefully received, and we appreciate their time. They're very enthusiastic answers as well. Some of us gave us some really good bits of intel, so it's great to have that. We also really want to hear your thoughts as an audience on today's discussion, how it progresses. So please engage in the Q&A. We have a question box on the top right-hand side of the player here. If you've got a question for a specific panelist, please address the question to that person, and we'll make sure it's directed to that relevant that person. Also, I just need to point out the answers to the original survey have been compiled into an ebook, which will shortly be available to download via ifsecglobal.com. The ebook itself will provide deeper insight into the industry's current views and provide an essential guide into where this critically important technology is heading, the challenges it sees on the horizon, more importantly, and I think this is very important, the opportunities that will be available, particularly for security professionals. To make the research more representative, the answers that they gave us, they were all anonymized. So the companies were actually free to speak how they wanted to. So in that way, we've got some really good feelings and strategies and challenges that both they and their customers may be facing. Also, don't forget, because you're on the IFSEC Connect platform at the moment, you can search and visit virtual booths for intruder detection companies and their products. And you can also arrange one-to-one meetings with them following this discussion. So it's a unique opportunity to catch up with leading industry experts and manufacturers to hear about their latest solutions and discuss your projects. Finally, a little bit of housekeeping. If you're experiencing any technical problems at all, please type in any issues into the chat box and one of the technical team will be on hand to support you. If you'd like to watch the webinar back or have any internet issues during the session, please don't worry. This will be available to watch back on demand throughout June. It is being recorded. Didn't know that, everybody, so there you go. So feel free to log on anytime in June and catch up between meetings on the platform to watch at your leisure. So I'll stop talking. We can move on to the discussion with the panel and its thoughts and findings on the survey. We asked a series of questions around areas such as wider trends, what the customers will look like in the future, I think is really important. What are their key concerns, growth and opportunities in certain sectors, the inevitable impact of COVID, because that's probably had quite a big influence at the moment, cybersecurity issues, and the growth of cloud, which is all around us at the moment. The common themes that emerged from the survey were changing requirements from the end user customers. They are changing. There's a growing appetite for IP and IoT-based intruder devices, new consumer-facing options, and by that I mean the Ring doorbells, the Amazon stuff, the stuff you buy in B&Q, understanding cyber threats, how systems can be hacked, security as an integral part of the home automation setup, and integrated systems. Where does Intruder sit in an integrated security solution? So these are the trends that have been emerging. So I'll go with the first question, and Anna, if I may, I'll direct this one to you, because this is kind of like a sort of an overall meta question, really, I suppose. From what you're seeing and what you understand, what would you say are the biggest trends at the moment shaping the intruder alarm industry within the next 5 to 10 years?
Sounds good. Well, there's so many, and you have already touched on some of the most pertinent ones. But I think the biggest trend that we can see is the transformation of the intruder alarm system from the traditional plain signaling device that there's something wrong happening to a much more interactive system, one that you, as an end user, can connect at home to control which part of the house is kind of protected, armed, which isn't. but also the same applies for the installer, who is able now to maintain the system remotely, update the firmware, just make sure the systems are up to scratch in terms of cybersecurity compliance as well. But another major trend is integration. Indeed, it's not just a standalone system anymore. In the residential space, we're seeing much more demands for integration with maybe IP home security cameras, connected doorbells, or other connected devices like smart lights or thermostats, or maybe even leak detectors. While in the commercial space, we're seeing that intruder alarms are becoming an ever more important part of the smart buildings infrastructure. They provide necessary input and data into the smart buildings platforms. And I believe maybe even in the future, for the, over the next 10 years, the more we move towards smart cities, the more whatever is installed in a building will become an important source of data for the outside of the building infrastructure. And essential to all that transformation are communication technologies. So now we're having a huge changeover from 2G, the very second generation, very early forms of communication, to 4G. And hopefully at some point, we're going to see benefits of 5G once it's fully deployed. But then we also have technologies such as cloud connectivity, enabling that remote access, enabling user applications and new features, plus development in the IoT protocols like LoRaWAN or Sigfox, and all these alternative pathways enabling added features for systems. So there's a huge set of technologies and factors, and also end user preferences that are changing the whole space. And I think systems are becoming much more connected, interactive, and much more part of your lifestyle, rather than just a security system that just hangs on the wall.
Absolutely. So Adrian, as a manufacturer, where would you as Texecom, where would you pitch the next 5 to 10 years? So what Anna's saying, are they things that you would say you're identifying and your customers are looking for?
Absolutely, Gerry. I mean, there's an awful lot already of integration that goes on, and we have done for many years. But it's all kind of been at the high end. As technology obviously gets cheaper and starts to fall down the ladder, as it were, it becomes more affordable for more people. So the spread gets much wider. So we're definitely seeing more integration requirements with things like access control, home automation systems, the ability for people to use the app on their phone. That was something that we drove through the BSIA to make sure there was an acceptance of that across stakeholders, so that it could be used on a police reporting system, or something that was inspected by the SSAIB or the NSI. So all of these things are kind of happening. There was a bit of a trickle really with the cloud and remote maintenance before the lockdown and the advent of COVID. But as soon as that hit, I think an awful lot of installers and professional security companies realized the benefits of remote maintenance, the benefits of being able to remotely configure, make changes, make sure systems were going to work properly. All of that good stuff came to the fore.
Brilliant. So David, that was a really interesting segue. You mentioned NSI and SSAIB. From David, from the SSAIB's point of view, does that chime with your companies in terms of what you're looking for on inspection levels?
Yeah, it does. We're seeing more and more of the systems where the end user gets some kind of benefit from the intruder system other than an intruder alarm system. I think historically, the intruder alarm systems have always been seen as a bit of a grudge purchase. The end user simply switches on overnight, switches off in the morning, and sees nothing else from it. Whereas now the fact that the ability that they can see it on the phone, interact with it, is becoming more and more commonplace with all our installers. And I think some of the new kids on the block who maybe presently don't comply with all the standards that the professional companies do, there's good and there's bad, and I think that the industry needs to look at these seriously as they are. They're not all bad, and I think we've got to learn from them, and I think many installers are kind of looking to the competition out there and how they've got to adapt.
Absolutely. So do you think it's almost like an industry responsibility to really push the adherence to standards, competency, all of those areas, because of the competition coming from, let's say, retail?
Well, certainly for the professional market, I see a trend in the residential move towards, God forbid, but it's true, DIY installations. The professionals have got to be able to differentiate themselves without ignoring what's happening for the residential market, but they've got to put themselves forward to not just the ring kind of installation, but if you want some peace of mind that your system is going to work when you want it to, let's install it by a professional. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Darrell, I suppose this will throw up, from what Anna said, it's a whole new world out there, isn't it? So your traditional security professional who years ago was probably, people have told me about the tinfoil around the window. So it's gone from being a system that used to just alarm people to now being preventative. That's something I want to come on to later because I'm intrigued about that. But where would you see the training and skills opportunities here particularly for installers?
So, I mean, the trend that we seem to see is your apprentices in general seem to be a lot more engaged with mobile phone technology and a bit more receptive to the training that's based around cloud-based systems and mobile services. And as David and Adrian said, there's that little bit of clarification that's required within the industry for what we use and when we use it. And there is a trend of, are we moving away from, certainly for small to medium-sized residential, where it's no longer going to be a graded or a monitored system, that it is simply monitored by the homeowner themselves, and it doesn't require any police intervention or require to go back to any RC. And that's going to be a conversation between insurance companies and the BSIA and the inspectorate bodies like SSAIB and NSI of how do we move forward from this. And there is a bit of a worry, and we get this on a week-to-week basis with the odd company, mainly their apprentices, really coming towards to say, well, what do you think is going to happen with the intruder alarm industry in the coming years? And some of them, not a fear for workload in their jobs and how they actually work day to day, but a lot of it has gone down the DIY route. It's all scanning a QR code, connecting it to a router, and there's no need for an installer for an intervention. Granted, there's no grading there, and they're then struggling to get any sort of system monitoring, especially back to any RC. But for the training point of view, especially for the smart systems, there is going to need to be, at the very, very least, a basic understanding of how our conventional intruder alarm systems can communicate to the outside world, especially over an IP network. And that has been a bit of a challenge, especially for existing engineers and upskilling them. And we have been running CPD courses, and we were involved with you guys last year for skills. We had a partnership with our webinars that we've done over the April break period, really addressing signalling in particular for intruder alarm systems and how we would set these up and how would this interconnect to each other, how we set up remote monitoring and how we actually carry it out. And there is a lot of training involved within that, especially for getting these young apprentices and the industry to understand, right, fair enough, we have a system connected to an ARC that's got remote monitoring, but there's protocol within that. We can't just jump on the bandwagon, system sets, the system unsets, all good, and then we send an invoice to the customer. There's set protocols within the standards that people need to adhere to, whether it's through a secure computer or a specific amount of log entries that we have to then backdate to make sure that the system's compliant or the system's working. But I definitely agree. Great for a preventative market. Fantastic when we're starting to roll out remote maintenances, especially during COVID. That's been fantastic for businesses to be able to continue operating and continue getting a revenue stream. But with regards to training, there's definitely a little bit there that has to be tweaked, and not just from an apprentice point of view, but industry-wide, understanding how IP systems connect, understanding how we actually connect the system to the World Wide Web and connect it to a user's mobile phone.
Brilliant. So, I mean, that leads me on to a question really for Adrian. Is there a duty, do you think, for vendors to educate installers and straight integrators? Where does the line end? Or
yeah, I mean, we've been very active on the training side of things, and certainly again, inspired really in the early days by the lockdown in COVID, when installation engineers were unsure as to whether or not they were classed as key workers, and lots of them were at home. it seemed an ideal opportunity to try and help these guys out and just give them the space and the time to upskill their knowledge. So, you know, we, and I know a load of other manufacturers as well, ran, you know, some courses online. We continue to do that now. Our involvement with the Engineers of Tomorrow and World Skills platforms are very, very important to Texecom as a business. You know, we understand that and really want to push the next generation of engineers for the future, because, you know, we can see the gaps. You know, myself being involved in writing some of these standards for cybersecurity protocols for manufacturers and installers, you can just see where some of the difficulties have been. And Darrell's absolutely right. You know, there are a huge number of engineers who have been around an awful long time that have done things a particular way. And I think all of a sudden, lockdown and COVID has just kind of kicked that step change a little bit harder, and things seem to be moving a little bit quicker. So, you know, I think it's important that all of these things happen, and you know, we continue to support, you know, the Engineers of Tomorrow, World Skills, as I say, and all of the colleges that run the Skills for Security courses. We provide a significant amount of equipment, which is all cloud connected, so that you know, the new guys are training on the stuff that's going to be there in the next 10 years. Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, moving on to that, I mean, David, this question for you, I suppose, is where, you know, what do you think the this sort of installer straight integrator will look like in 5 years' time? You know, what skills are they going to need, particularly with, you know, stuff moving into a different sphere? It's intriguing, really.
Yeah, well, I think in certain respects, part of the skill or competence of an installer, in some respects, is diminishing with the ease of installation. That companies like Texecom have kind of, you know, provided the products which certainly the wireless ones anybody can install with a little bit of, you know, knowledge. So in some respects, there's a certain amount of de-skilling come about with installers. However, with communications via IP, then there's a need there for an increased knowledge of, you know, how to connect and how to make best use of connection via the internet. And also, I think we'll probably discuss more later on, but the challenges of, you know, the cyber threat. So I think that's where the increase in skill is going to be needed in the professional area.
Absolutely. So going back to Adrian, do you think that's where the gaps will be?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we've already seen some, you know, there's been some minor impacts from the PSTN switch off by BT. You know, so by 2025, effectively, you know, digital communicators as we know them now and love them, sometimes hate them, you know, they're pretty much all going to be gone, and we're already seeing the impact in some areas. The more and more this rolls out, the more the network expands and things start to change from an infrastructure point of view, the more problems we're getting with the existing technology. So things do have to move quicker than they are now. People will have to get onto the IP platforms quicker, and of course then there is the exposure and the risk of cyber problems, and these are hugely important.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll come on to cyber later, but that's definitely one of the key areas that came up. Anna, one thing that's really intrigued us and something that we saw coming out of the industry survey is where would you see, I don't know if it's something that Omdia has covered, but where would you see particular growth in specific verticals? You know, are there areas that you're seeing through your research that would indicate, particularly to the intruder alarm profession, is where there's going to be growth? I think that's really important. Is any particular areas, and I think especially at the moment around COVID, are there particular areas that you would have identified where there's growth?
So COVID, I think, has really changed the structure of growth in certain verticals. Before, you could say, well, that was the retail sector growing with the kind of the increased demand of protection for warehouses and all the distribution centers, logistics centers. And that has continued through COVID as well, because the demand for everyone switched to online shopping, right? So someone had to fill out the demand, and that put a huge strain on those providers of those services. So we have still seen growth there. But in the retail space as well, all of a sudden you had a sector of it being completely shut down. And these small shops, restaurants, they have become a prime target for burglars, because obviously there's no one going to be there, and there might be some very expensive equipment inside those places. So that's a perfect target to also go after. But then at the same time, with the whole pandemic, it appeared that a lot of healthcare facilities had very outdated security systems, and perhaps you really don't need them because now the hospitals would have been occupied really 24/7 in every single space of the hospital, even that were previously not used. However, it became clear that while the staff worked hard to protect, to help patients and focus on their actual day-to-day jobs, there had to be some update to the security, protecting the offices spaces in hospitals. So those had to be updated as well. So we have seen a number of these, but same with the residential vertical. Traditionally, it's a fairly fast-growing vertical. I mean, as fast in relative terms for intruder alarm systems. But then we have seen a switch over demand. So with initial lockdowns, there was a complete stoppage of that in some countries and in some regions in Europe. However, other countries and regions in Europe have taken this opportunity to take advantage of low interest rates, start buying houses, renovate them, and that really fueled the demand for maybe more of those basic alarm systems that are probably more affordable, but that will protect those facilities. And if it was a construction site, then installers were much more welcome to those sites because the homeowner didn't have to interact directly with the installers. So we have seen a shift in the demand of the types of products as much as the overall volume of demand.
Absolutely. So Adrian, I'll ping to you again as a manufacturer. I mean, obviously Texecom deals on both residential and commercial, but has there been a theme that you've noticed over this period that's highlighted particular areas of interest for your customers, I suppose?
It's a difficult one, that really. I think there was a lot of interest actually. You know, initially, again, picking up on what Anna's just said there with the residential. Initially, at the beginning of the lockdown, yeah, absolutely, the thing just seemed to die. But then, as soon as people, switched on to the remote aspect and the cloud-based technologies, it really did start to pick back up again. So people were kind of like, yeah, okay, I may be at home, but then you can still see that an awful lot of burglaries happen when people are actually at home. So it sometimes doesn't actually make that much difference. So we've certainly seen the residential market still be buoyant. People still want an internet connected system. They want a bit of control over that. And as for the commercials, yeah, that market still continues to be very, very good. Apart from the obvious retail sector where things closed down. But even initially when they did, there was always the opportunity for a temporary alarm system because those assets that are inside needed to be protected. So I think actually some people enhance their security rather than forgetting about it.
Yeah, absolutely. You've touched on cloud. I mean, it's the thing that we can't really get away from. It's all around us, obviously. Yeah. So what would you say, what role is cloud playing at the moment, particularly in the intruder alarm and maintenance market? And I suppose really, how do you inform the customers about the benefit of cloud? How would you go about that?
Okay, so people who actually use our cloud-based system, they're obviously a very targeted audience for us, so we can keep them up to speed with things that are going on all the time and everything else. We use plenty of digital platforms to communicate the messages and the benefits out. We use our training platforms to do that. We did some 30 sort of minute bite-sized type courses just explaining the benefits of remote cloud technology and what it allows people to do. I think one of the key things that's starting to sink into people now is, of course, as soon as you connect something to the internet, you effectively expose it to the cyber risk, and that points to any IoT device, many intruder alarm systems, and anything else that goes with it. So the ability for installers to be able to patch at will, mass numbers of control systems instantly is definitely a benefit. The ability to run remote maintenance checks on a daily basis if required means that you're always on top of when a system potentially goes down or a fault starts to develop. So you can be reactive rather than having to go out 3-4 o'clock in the morning. So there are a huge number of benefits to the professional installer, and it allows them to add a significant amount of value to the end user, which I think is another key benefit.
Absolutely. On the flip side of that, so David, do when you're actually out, doing the inspections and everything else, do your approved companies do they flag any concerns? Are there sort of myths that you need to break, or are they worried about it, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think there's been a little bit of reluctance from some of the I choose my words carefully here, our older installers who kind of set in the ways and I'm going to use Redcare only because that's what I know and that's good, etc. But gradually, there's an acceptance of the benefits to both them and their customers of using cloud services. It's more affordable now than communicating with the alarm system is more affordable now than it ever used to be, connecting via the internet. So yeah, more and more acceptance by them, and I think say being able to give increased services to their customers certainly helps in selling the wares to the end user.
Well, and by that, do you mean moving more into sort of home automation areas, or?
Sorry, say again, please, Gerry.
Do you mean like moving into home automation areas and additional
certainly
of what they can do?
Yeah, home automation, but I guess remote maintenance is something which is really enabled much easier through connectivity through the internet. Historically, the residential market, most of it was kind of what was termed as bells only, no communication at all. Well, now with IP communication, it's more affordable for even the market which was audible only to have a communication device, even if it's not for police response, but simply for the installer to be able to update the software, provide support, diagnostics, and as I say, even for remotely maintaining the system.
Brilliant. So obviously with this, it moves into the realm of cyber, which I know is a scary word for lots of people. The focus that IFSEC's had on cyber, just to sort of set the tone, is that cyber security has always been seen as a domain of like the IT sector. I don't know whether you guys would agree, but where there's an overlap, we think for the world of IFSEC is in hardware. We think that that's where particularly it's inherent in integrated systems, in IP-enabled hardware that all sits together. So by its very nature, there is a vulnerability inherent in the technology. So I suppose, Darrell, it's asking you really from from that side of the fence in terms of installers. What do you think the supply chain has a role in ensuring that connected intruder alarms are cyber secure? Do you think there's an education gap there?
100%. And taken away from the apprenticeship, that's our bread and butter. That was always going to be delivered. It was always going to be adapted, and would always be delivering the changes to the sector as and when it comes. But there has been a lot more demand for upskilling engineers, and engineers, as you said, David, some of the ones that are maybe more reluctant, that are Redcare loyalists, that want to throw in a wire. They don't want anything to run off a battery other than the control panel. I think with that rapid development of cloud-based systems, IP connectivity, and cyber awareness, there's been a massive flock, and you'll have seen it, Adrian, as well, and all the other manufacturers that are delivering their online CPDs as well as us. We've seen a massive uptake in our online CPD availability, whether it's to do with cyber secure, cyber essentials, and how an engineer can do all they can. Going back to what you'd said about, does it still rely with an IT professional within the commercial space? Yes, I would definitely say so. Managing the network and controlling their own internal network, 100%, I think would still rely on the IT professionals within that business. But not to say that the fire and security engineers on site, especially for intruder alarms, IP CCTV and access control, we still have a duty of care to make sure that things like default passwords have been changed, that if we're installing routers to create our own little internal network, that the sticker's been taken off of the router, that the Wi-Fi's been disabled, that the UPnP connection has been turned off so that nobody can just plug into the router and it works. We have very, very small things that we can do, very basic IT things that we can learn and we can deploy across every system connected to a network that would secure it from our point of view. Residential's a lot easier. There's not much involvement other than ensuring that you've got rated hardware, that you're using professionally made and professionally manufactured kit that complies to industry standard. and then just making sure that the port forwarding, if it's required, has been done correctly. You're not leaving yourself or the homeowner's network open or exposed. That silly little things like any UPnP ports that might be required to set up a DVR or an intruder alarm system has been disabled after you've left, and any default passwords have been changed. But the biggest influx has been from the existing engineer market desperately wanting to upskill and understand how to do this. Engineers that have been doing it for 30, 40 years, they've only ever done it thrown in a hard wire. With this scare of IP, and as you said, cyber, the word cyber frightens the life out of everybody. As soon as you hear it, you start to panic, you start to sweat, and I think there is a massive uptake in people wanting to know more about it. And we've been delivering it, and we've been certainly putting ourselves out there to provide CPD for the industry.
Brilliant. And I suppose, Adrian, it comes down to as well from your side again as a manufacturer, and apologies, I'll keep hitting you with the manufacturer thing, but it's kind of, are there fundamentals that you put into the hardware that, or is it training, is it instructions, is it, what do you say to the customer to make sure that your product isn't the vulnerability, I suppose?
It's a kind of a combination of all of them, really. Yes, we provide the training. Yes, we provide all the instructions on our digital app that people carry around with every single manual in there. But actually, yeah, from a hardware point of view, and just get it out of the box, we don't leave anything open effectively. There's nothing there where you can set something up and connect to our cloud without ensuring you've got passwords in place. Without ensuring that you've taken the steps to make sure you're secure. From your customer's point of view. And I mean, there are other things as well, developing the cyber standards within the BSIA and the work involved in doing those both for manufacturers and installers. Just some basic stuff like, if you're going to go to somebody's house, you can't just go and plug your laptop in. Because your laptop might be infected, but vice versa, their network might be infected, and you can take that back to the company. So there's a little bit of knowledge there, just basic good stuff that you should and shouldn't do.
There's almost like a common sense around it all, isn't there? It's like,
it sounds like common sense when you say it, but actually it's very easy to do, isn't it? It's like, there's a network port there, I'll just plug in, I'll configure everything from there. But that could be it. You could expose yourself, you could expose your business to it. There are all sorts of pitfalls. So being cyber aware these days, I think, is absolutely critical in the intruder industry, as well as access and CCTV. And the more systems are integrated and connected together, the more this becomes a requirement and a skill that people should have.
Absolutely, which is interesting. So I was just about to ask about integration. So Anna, I'll point this one to you actually. So obviously integration is on the increase. I mean, to be honest, it's something that we've been hearing for decades now, but I think we're probably in a golden period where it's being realized. Where does intruder detection, because obviously I said at the opening that it is perceived as like the original technology in security. Where does intruder technology sit in an integrated system? How does it work? And the other part of it as well, does it produce data that's usable for the end user? Does the intruder system give you business intelligence? Is it viable?
So that's a very important question now going forward, since the more we're seeing integration at different stages of the equipment, but also in the cloud, then you're starting to wonder what's the best source of information about the building or a certain kind of area for business analytics, but in general, just having an awareness of what's happening in your facility. And I feel like Intruder, through the different sensors, the PIR sensors, magnetic contact, can provide a very detailed aspect of for a specific facility. So say, for example, in a bar, and if you have magnetic contacts open on certain fridges with certain types of alcohol or drinks, then you are better able to monitor how many times that fridge was open. And maybe there's a demand for those types of products at a certain time of day or night, which you probably wouldn't be able to see just looking at your normal sales, or maybe it's just a different process that you would have to go through to get this understanding. When it comes to bigger buildings, I feel like generally the sensors across the building can provide partial picture of what's happening. But what we have noticed with integrated systems, increasingly the video feeds, perhaps powered by analytics on board of those cameras, or maybe at the back end, are providing extra layer of information, perhaps a form of verification of what the intruder sensors have provided. So then you're getting the whole idea and a whole more complete picture of what's really happening in a building. And then when you fuse that with signals from the access control systems, from the entrance gates, and however many times someone tried to enter a facility without having the permission to do this, then that helps to kind of create a more complete picture. But I would believe that intruder alarm signals are just one part of a broader building image.
That's really good. So Adrian, I mean, from your side, I suppose it's quite a down to the basics really. How does it actually integrate? What integration aspects do you bring to it in terms of you're integrating with access and surveillance? What protocols and stuff do you need to make sure are in place? And I suppose how does an integrator really make themselves aware of what the products can do?
Yeah, so depending on what, I mean, we've got partnerships with the likes of CSL. So for communicators, there's a protocol already built into the control equipment. So it's a very simple thing for the engineer to plug the unit on and get it up and running, no problem at all. If you look at things like Control 4 home automation, then we've had specific protocols written, so they're available, and integrators can use those. When you get to the more of like the business end of things, with CCTV and with access control, there are we've got some full-on IP integration with certain companies, and others could just be a basic key switch, turnkey effects, just coming out of the access control system into our panel and then allowing it to control things from there. So it really covers a very broad range of different types of integration. It just depends kind of what you're trying to achieve. What's the end game? What are you actually trying to do? Yeah.
And does that feed into the building management side of it as well then? Does it talk to other aspects?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no reason why you can't control, or the intruder alarm system can't be part of the control for things when, temperature change happens, when leak detection is in place. Things like we're seeing more and more now layered approaches to intruder detection, which involves the outside of the property and the compound before you even get to the building. So there are all sorts of intelligent decisions that can be made in combination with sensors, with cameras, with analytics and software to provide a much better decision-making process rather than just saying, I'm going to ring that bell because something's happened.
Absolutely. Darrell, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to get in on that a little bit. And we always look at integration from a standpoint of it has to be through a cloud automation and through a management system. And as Adrian had said, and Anna had mentioned on it as well, we can do integration very, very simply by inputs and outputs. An output from an intruder alarm, when a door opens, it's inputs into a CCTV system, allows that camera to force record or provide an image, and that can then be relayed back onto a management system or to a viewing platform. And then, as Adrian started to talk about is there as well, is we're moving away from an intruder alarm system being just an intruder alarm system, having an intruder alarm system with the perimeter being set when, for example, a 24-hour supermarket or a supermarket it closes its doors from 10 until 6 in the morning, but uses that time to restock the shelves. It enforces that protocol that right, we shouldn't be getting out these doors. There's a process and a protocol to be used within this building. Or if we're looking at it from a point of view where we can relay those signals from a freezer alarm, okay, the temperature's dropped. We can then pass that information on to the customer to say, at 1:30 this morning, it looked as if your freezer alarm had triggered, indicating that the temperature has started to rise, end up spoiling the produce, and there's limitless connectivity with that. And that's where I see the best type of integration coming from it. And the only issue with specific automation systems and bringing intruder alarm systems into a central management system is just how we then manage that, and how there's not really clarification there from the standards point of view to be able to enforce that or to carry out certain activities, or whether we're getting police response, or how does that then work. Simple automation and simple integration can be done with inputs and outputs, and I think people start to overcomplicate things at times where we can be doing it very, very simply.
So critically, how does that impact on false alarm management?
Well, it all depends on how you're then providing that information to the alarm receiving centre, or if it is signalling. we're always going to be bound at the moment anyway, whether that changes, whether the standards will be updated. But for example, within intruder alarm systems, we have to apply BS 8243 to make sure that we're going to provide confirmation within a building to get that police response. There's then the additional layers of process and parameters within that we need to comply with. But with regards to third-party integration with day-to-day, the store can be open, whether we're transmitting specific signals for gas alarms or freezer alarms for leak detection. That can all be done out with the intruder alarm, the ARC, or relayed to the ARC to contact that customer. But especially if we're talking about management platforms and app control, those can be done as push notifications. So there wouldn't be a requirement for police attendance if there's a freezer alarm. It would simply be the customer has to attend, but they would then still retain the compliance with BS 8243 to get the police response when there's an actual intruder alarm. Perfect.
I suppose nowadays, with policing levels being quite a hot potato, it's more important than ever, isn't it, to manage the call outs and stuff. It's interesting you mentioned standards, because I'll move this on, if I could, to David. It's something that came out of the survey is with the emerging new technology, do you think this will have an impact on the current UK standards? And can you see the standards having to adapt or change?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a point I was keen to make that, again, talking a little bit historically, but the standards in some way have been inhibitive to kind of innovation, and also the professional market being able to provide a product or a service to the customer that the customer wants and they'd like to provide, but the standards don't allow. So those that write the standards, I include myself in that category, by the way, so some responsibility on myself here. Those who write the standards have got to be aware that the standards shouldn't be written in a prescriptive way. They should be more written towards what the outcome needs to be. Leave the manufacturers and the installers to install it in a way that provides the outcome that's necessary, i.e. it may be a sequentially confirmed alarm, but don't specify in the standard that it must be installed this way. Because the standards take an awful long time to be revised. Generally, they're not updated at least within 5 years, and technology moves at a pace. So those in the standards industry need to be aware of this. They are, and I'm aware that standard Darrell mentioned, BS 8243 deals with confirmed alarms, certainly in the UK anyway, for our UK listeners. Historically, it specified far too much how the installer needed to do something, and that has just been revised. A lot of the prescriptive elements have come out of it, so it's moving slowly, and it's something that's got to happen in the standards market.
Absolutely. And do you often find that your approved companies struggle to keep up with standards, or do they, how do they digest the information? Because something that we've always heard from, we have our IFSEC Installer Council, and they're a really rich audience of intel, but standards always comes up as a problem, and they kind of want it in a bite-sized, understandable way. What do they need to know, effectively, is what they're saying. Yeah,
I have real sympathy with installers out there with the standards. Unlike the electrical industry, which generally have one book to read, without boring all our listeners out there, intruders, there's several European standards, in 50131-1, there's a -7. There's about 3 British standards, 8243.
Don't get on fire either.
I'll stop there. So the installers have a real challenge in keeping abreast of what the standards require, and be perfectly honest, many of them rely on the inspection bodies, ourselves and the NSI, who go along and say, you got that wrong, Mr. Installer. That's not our role, by the way, to teach them, but that's what comes out of an audit. We point them in the right direction if they're not complying with standards.
Absolutely. And Darrell, is that something that you try and factor in as well at an early stage, particularly with the apprentices? It's part of the heavy lifting, isn't it?
as David said, there's no get bored about them. We seem to be the most overly regulated industry in the UK. Whether that kind of translates worldwide, I don't know. But you look at the electrical industry, and as David said, you've got one book, more or less. And we've got 6 books for Intruder. We've got umpteen standards for fire, and access and CCTV are the only ones that really fall into a kind of single book remit almost, because of it's a European standard that we're using in that adaptation from. But we do drum into the apprentices from get-go all the way through. It's not an interesting subject to go on at the very, very start. It's all very much numbers and letters, and they don't understand what it is. But our practice, rather than, right, this is EN 50131 Part 7, you need to know the application guidelines, this is this, read through. We tend to take it from a standpoint of, right, this is the standard. You guys may not be able to recall it at the top of your head, but this is how we're going to apply it. And I think a lot of installers, I think they panic when they have to recite the actual name of the standard, but they know how it works in practice. And I think that's more important than being able to recall the name of the standard. And we do drum that in. And as I've mentioned a couple of times previously, we have a few CPD available for people to actually get a hold of how we design a system, how the system actually complies to standards, and how that standard is then used throughout the system's life.
Brilliant, that's fantastic. And Anna, you have your hand up very patiently
Yeah,
there.
yeah, I do. I just wanted to add something to what David and Darrell were talking about, because I do believe that the standards bodies have a slight opportunity to play a role of innovation bodies. While they work on the standards, they are the ones who could just dive into new trends, see what the new products are like, how could they work, and then be proactive in suggesting how best to integrate those products into the existing very highly regulated market. Otherwise, we're going to have Apple, Amazons, and Rings coming in and disrupting the space, and then our local installers will be worrying, like, how do I get on board with that without understanding how these systems work? And at the same time, I believe with the kind of more innovative systems and cybersecurity adding to that, there needs to be a recognition that if you have just gotten a smartphone in your hand, but you have only used a landline before, you just need to be made aware how it works. And I think this will help make everyone a bit more aware of like what to kind of be careful of, and like how to proactively read rules and maybe try and kind of abide with new practices. I think it will just make things a bit easier.
Absolutely.
And also, I must say, well, one thing that I've heard from manufacturers that I speak to for the interviews regarding standards is that sometimes they just didn't know the standard came into force. So I believe there is an element of communication here. I'm not sure at what levels, but very often it was right after maybe a month to the deadline, and they realized that they have to update certifications on certain types of sensors or parts of the intruder alarm system, which kind of first further in the works. But there's an element of communication, I think, as well as much to the fact that standards sometimes are a bit threatening to read because these are big publications, very detailed. I myself have tried to read them, and it took a few tries.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, you want to do fire, that's something else altogether. I mean, I suppose it's a responsibility as well of, you know, it does come down, Adrian, to trade associations and, you know, the professional bodies. I think as well, I'm thinking maybe the approvals organizations, it's that awareness thing, isn't it? Because, you know, these standards will appear, and like Anna said, they don't make, you know, they don't make the 10 o'clock news. They're not easily digestible. You have to try and keep up with what's going on. So I suppose it throws it back in your court from the BSI perspective that you need to make sure that the members are fully aware, I suppose, don't you? So how do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, in our manufacturer section, and we've got very close working relationships now with our installing partners at the BSIA and with wider stakeholders groups, like David's organisation and the NSI and the Met Police and ACPO and various other people as well. So we all kind of get together a couple of times a year when stuff needs to be sorted out. And the rest of the time, the standard lunatics like me spend our time arguing with people in Europe about how stuff should be done, because obviously people want to do things differently. But the absolute key thing that comes out of all of that previous discussion for me is about the simplification of the standards and speeding things up, because they are absolutely too technology dependent at the moment, and they are severely lacking when it comes to keeping up with with the latest trends in technology. So we at the BSIA try and drive codes of practice. If something doesn't exist, but installers and end users want to use it, then we'll get that group of bodies together. We'll create codes of practice, which we then try and drive and push through the BSI and Senelec to make them into European or British standards. And we're doing one at the moment with the use of voice assistants, so the likes of Google Home and Alexa. Being able to control your security system. And that sounds like a really scary, stupid thing to do in some respects, but actually people want to do it. So we're trying to work out a way of it and allowing that to happen before a standard exists. So that's the kind of work that we do at the BSIA, which is very important.
Absolutely, and we're obviously we've been close partners with the BSIA for a number of years. So whatever we can do from an IFSEC point of view, we're more than happy to help you communicate
of course,
that.
Traditionally at the IFSEC, we've been to in the past, we'd have the theatres and we'd have the education pieces, and there's an opportunity for people to learn about this stuff because that environment exists. It's all kind of online now, so it's kind of the same but different. We can have these online discussions, but it's not quite the same as being able to go up to somebody after a seminar or go back to them, an hour later and say, actually, do you mind if I just talk to you about this? Because I wasn't, do you know what I mean? It wasn't quite clear. So the previous, I've done IFSEC 30 times in a row. So
have we given you a medal or anything?
I think something.
That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it definitely needs doing, and it definitely needs sorting out. And there's a huge conversation going on in Europe at the moment about the 50131-1, which is the main system standard that David was just referenced just then. That thing needs to be revised, but it needs to be revised in an absolutely radical way to make it more user friendly and make it future proof. Because at the moment it's just not workable.
Absolutely. I'm mindful of time because we've got about 4 minutes left before the close. There's one thing I just want to try and get out there. It's and it comes back to this sort of proliferation of the DIY stuff. How do you think the professional security community can offset that challenge? What would you need to impart to the real, the professional security companies if this is seen as a challenge? What do they need to tell their customers really about, how they need to, I think, offset that challenge? Because it's, as David said earlier, it's kind of dumbing down stuff. And obviously there's a lot of standards involved here. There's a lot of maintenance, there's a lot of professionalism. So what would you say would be a recommended approach? And Darrell, I'll chuck that one to you because it's something you could probably build into the apprentices.
Very hard one, to be honest. I'm glad I'm kind of reluctant to answer that question. I'm not a massive fan of the kind of smart home tech. I do agree with David. It dumbs down the industry. I think it's got its place. I don't disagree with it. I think the equipment and the technology behind it's fantastic. I do not discredit that at all. It's just I don't know how we try to move away from it. Whether it's I think the best thing to do is roll with the punches with, for example, Amazon Alexa or the Ring doorbell. There is alternatives that I know that Texecom and some of the other CCTV manufacturers do that are similar or integrate into a specific platform. Whether there's the integration of, do we look at can a Ring doorbell integrate with Texecom's mobile app? That way that we're still getting in the door with that customer, that end user, and still being able to provide a service. The biggest thing that I can stress with it is this tends to be ungraded. It can't provide any sort of response. It can't provide any police action. So the biggest thing from that point of view is the system that you may be buying, the system that you may be installing, doesn't really comply to anything other than smart home tech. It's no different to the camera on your phone. It's not going to provide you with additional service, but maybe that's where the residential market, especially for the small to medium size, then ends up breaking away. We've got the small domestic market that ends up becoming smart home tech.
Buyer beware almost, isn't it?
Yeah, almost.
That's it. So thank you very much. With that, unfortunately, our time has come to an end today. So I'd like to thank everybody involved. It's been fantastic. I think we covered a lot of ground there. So I think we've hopefully given an idea as to the future of where this technology is going, because it's incredibly important. So just to let everyone know, within the next 24 to 48 hours, today's discussion should be available to watch back to back on demand on the IFSEC Connect platform. Feel free to invite your colleagues, people who have not been able to attend today, and get them involved in IFSEC Connect. And don't forget the ebook, which actually fueled today's conversation, will shortly be available to download from IFSEC Global. It's free of charge, recommended reading for any security professional with an active interest in intruder alarms and detection. Later in the month, on Tuesday, the 22nd of June at 2 p.m, we'll also be looking at protecting cities and public spaces, and there's loads of exclusive product demos going on at the moment on the IFSEC Connect platform, as well as content from our co-located shows, which are FireX, Safety and Health Expo, Facilities Show, Intelligent Buildings Europe, and the Workplace Wellbeing Show. The IFSEC Connect platform will be open until the 30th of June, so please browse the exhibitors for all your security requirements and make sure you use the request a meeting option to set up an opportunity to meet with them. So many thanks for watching. Thanks to you, the panel, it's been fantastic. We hope you provided you with some really good insights into the future of intruder detection. And from me, it's goodbye for now. Thank you very much once again. Cheers all.
Thank you very much.